In just a short burst of fighting, the battlefield turned against Russian forces at every level at once. Vehicles were struck before reaching their approach routes. A Kasta low-altitude radar was knocked out before it could protect the sector. Soldiers who jumped from damaged transports and ran into the woods were still tracked and hunted. Even Russian UAVs flying low over the line were no longer moving through safe air. This is not a story about one dramatic blast caught on camera. It is a story about Ukraine turning FPV drones into a full chain of attack. The target is seen early, followed without pause, cut off before it reaches the front, and then hit again if anyone survives the first contact. The danger now reaches far beyond the trench line. When a road to the front becomes a kill zone and a radar meant to warn about low-flying threats is silent, the whole structure behind an assault starts to break before the assault itself truly begins. That is why this matters more than a list of destroyed vehicles. Ground war is being shaped more and more by the fight for the low sky, where armor vehicles, infantry, and enemy drones are all being pulled into the same cycle of destruction. So if Russian forces are already being stopped on the move, what happens to the next wave when warning, movement, and resupply are all under attack at the same time? Russian vehicles are now being hunted before the assault even begins, which makes this opening phase especially dangerous for any unit trying to move toward the front. Ukrainian FPV teams are no longer waiting for Russian forces to appear near a village edge or a trench line. They are watching the approach roads first, then following vehicles while they are still trying to reach the staging areas where the next push is meant to take shape. This is changing the whole shape of the battlefield, because movement itself has become the most dangerous moment. A truck, an armored vehicle, or a transport carrying infantry may still be far from the main line, yet it is already inside the kill zone once a drone locks on. At that point, the operator has very little to guess. The road shows direction, speed reveals intent, and the target usually has very few places to disappear once it appears on camera. That's why these FPV drones are becoming one of the most important tools in this phase of the fight. Their video feed stays steady, the image remains sharp, and the control link is harder to disrupt, so the operator can hold the target longer and adjust the flight path while the vehicle is still moving. On a battlefield shaped by electronic pressure and very short reaction windows, that extra control can decide whether the operator loses the track or drives the strike all the way into the target. It also reduces the chance that Russian crews can escape simply by making a sudden turn or creating a few seconds of confusion. The sequence often begins in a simple way. A Russian vehicle moves along a secondary road or a rear supply route, usually trying to limit exposure and reach a point where troops can unload, regroup, and prepare for the next attack. From the ground, this may seem like a short and manageable movement. From above, it looks completely different. The drone is already in position, already adjusting its angle, and already turning that road into a watched corridor instead of a safe path forward. Russian forces are clearly trying to spend as little time on the move as possible. They push vehicles forward fast, avoid long stops, and try to reach cover before Ukrainian units can react. Ukraine, however, is waiting for the exact moment when speed offers the least protection, which is when a vehicle is moving, exposed, fixed to a route, and unable to respond well. A parked vehicle can hide more easily. A dug-in position can at least prepare. A moving truck on a narrow road has almost none of those advantages. The real issue now is no longer simply whether a unit can reach the front, but whether it can survive the trip there. The road to the battlefield is starting to become part of the battlefield itself. By the time troops believe they are nearing the real fight, the attack may already be underway above them. When vehicles are tracked from the approach route instead of being engaged only at the line of contact, the attacker starts losing control of timing, spacing, and surprise at the same time. That leaves a difficult question over every new Russian push. In a war where drones can follow movement so closely from above, is a fast vehicle still an advantage, or is it starting to look more like an invitation for the next strike? When the time comes, An Ukrainian FPV drone dives straight into a Russian tank, and the explosion tears through the armored vehicle before the crew even has time to react. Others tried to abandon the vehicle, but once a Russian transport is caught and chased, the strike often continues, and all soldiers who jumped out are also brought under attack. What begins as a pursuit of a truck or military vehicle quickly turns into a hunt across open ground. The first seconds after the stop are the most revealing. Men pour out, scatter fast, and run toward the nearest field edge, thin tree line, or patch of brush, believing that distance from the vehicle may give them a chance to survive. On this battlefield, that decision usually exposes them even more clearly. The reason is simple and brutal. A vehicle at least gives shape, speed, and short-term protection. The moment troops abandon it, each man becomes a separate moving mark seen from above. Instead of one target on the road, the drone operator now watches several figures breaking apart across exposed terrain. From the ground, scattering may feel like the only possible reaction. From the air, it often looks like the target has simply divided into smaller pieces that can still be followed. This is where the pace of the attack becomes more dangerous. One FPV keeps eyes on the movement below and holds the picture steady while another closes in to strike. The sequence does not stop when the transport is disabled. It simply changes shape. The road is left behind, but the attack continues into the field, toward the ditch, along the tree line, and into every place where the survivors try to disappear. What looked like an escape route a few seconds earlier becomes the next part of the kill zone. That makes the choice to leave the vehicle far less effective than it first appears. A soldier running alone has less protection, less awareness, and almost no way to know whether the drone above is still tracking him. Once men are spread out, mutual support weakens immediately. No one can stay focused on the wider picture because every second is spent looking for cover, listening for the drone, and trying to stay alive. The unit stops acting like a unit. It becomes a collection of isolated men moving under pressure, and that is exactly the condition FPV operators want to create. The footage linked to this pattern is especially harsh when the target is a truck carrying a large group of soldiers. In one such strike, the FPV dives straight into the vehicle before the men inside can disperse in time. The effect is severe because the truck is not just transport. It is concentrated manpower packed into a soft target moving on a predictable path. One direct hit can turn a single approach movement into a heavy loss in an instant, and the damage reaches far beyond the wreck itself because the surviving troops are left shocked, separated, and exposed to follow-up pursuit. Russian forces are clearly trying to reduce their signature through speed and rapid dispersal once contact begins. Ukraine is answering with a faster transition from chasing the vehicle to hunting the infantry forced out of it. That shift is what defines this stage of the battle. The strike is no longer aimed only at the machine. It is aimed at the surviving links left behind after the machine is hit. From this point forward, the attack is not really about breaking a formation in the classic sense. It is about removing each remaining piece one by one after the first blow has already landed. The next phase of the battle begins when Ukrainian FPV units stop chasing only exposed transport and start going after the assets that are supposed to protect the assault itself. At this point, the targets are no longer just moving trucks or soldiers caught in the open. The focus shifts to heavier and more valuable equipment. First the tank hidden near the line, then the radar and command vehicle working behind it. What appears on the screen is no longer a simple strike on a passing target. It is a step-by-step attack on the protective layer around the Russian push. One of the clearest scenes in this sequence starts with a Russian tank, concealed inside a prepared position near the edge of cover. It is not moving in open ground, and it is not leading a fast armored thrust. It is waiting under concealment, likely held back to support a later movement, or to provide fire once infantry pushes closer. The crew is using terrain and cover to reduce exposure, but the hiding place does not hold. Ukrainian operators detect the vehicle, keep the picture stable, and stay on it long enough to confirm the target before the strike begins. The attack does not end with one impact. FPV drones come in one after another, each pass forcing more damage and reducing the chance that the tank can survive the engagement. One hit lands, then another follows, and the sequence continues until the vehicle is clearly no longer usable. This part matters because the tank is not being treated as a target that can be damaged and ignored. It is being treated as an asset that must be removed completely before the next stage of the Russian action can even begin. From there, the strike pattern moves beyond armor and reaches the support system watching the sky. Ukrainian FPV units locate a Kasta low-altitude surveillance radar operating with its support vehicle. That first strike matters because the radar may continue scanning for a short time, but the flow of information is broken once the vehicle handling the data is hit. Only after that does the attack move on to the Kasta radar itself. The drone closes in, the impact lands, and the station is struck directly. What stands out here is the logic of the order. The operators are not just destroying hardware in random fashion. They are dismantling the site in the same way a working system functions. First, the vehicle that helps process and pass the warning. Then the radar that sees the low sky. The sequence is short, but it is methodical. The ground shield is hit first, then the aerial eye follows. That is what makes this stage more serious than the earlier pursuit of road traffic. Ukraine is no longer striking only what is moving toward the line. It is now striking what helps that movement survive once it gets there. The battle is no longer limited to roads, fields, and tree lines, because even the low sky is no longer a safe working space for Russian drones. A clear turn has appeared on the battlefield as Ukrainian FPV teams increasingly move from striking ground targets to intercepting enemy UAVs in the air. This changes the meaning of drone warfare in a serious way. The drone is no longer only a weapon used to hit what is below. It is now also a hunter sent to destroy what is flying nearby before that aircraft can finish its own mission. The sequence in these encounters is very different from a normal ground strike. Instead of diving toward a tank, a hidden position, or a fleeing soldier, the Ukrainian FPV now climbs, adjusts, and begins chasing another drone already in flight. The target may be an FPV moving toward Ukrainian lines, or a larger reconnaissance and bomber-type UAV working above the battlefield. The operator must close distance, match movement, and keep the enemy aircraft centered long enough to force a collision or deliver a direct hit. In practical terms, this turns the sky into a second front, where timing and control matter just as much as on the ground. What makes these interceptions so important is the role Russian UAVs play before any strike lands. They scout routes, watch positions, help guide attacks, and support frontline action by feeding the battlefield with live information. A drone in the air is not just a flying camera. It is often the eye that sees first and the hand that helps shape what happens next. Once Ukrainian FPV teams begin removing those aircraft in midair, the effect reaches beyond one lost machine. The Russian side loses vision, loses guidance, and loses one part of the system used to support troops below. The footage tied to this pattern shows a simple but important change in behavior. Ukrainian operators are no longer only waiting for Russian drones to complete their runs. They are moving to meet them in the air. A Russian UAV enters the zone, continues its path, and then a Ukrainian FPV approaches from another angle, closes fast, and destroys it before it can carry out the next step. The engagement is short, but the meaning is large. A drone that never reaches the front cannot observe, cannot adjust fire, and cannot help the next attack move forward. This part of the battle also fits the wider direction of the war. Open sources in recent months have shown Ukraine expanding this interceptor role against several Russian UAV families, including Lancet, Orlan, and Zala. Meanwhile, Ukraine also pushes broader FPV interception programs at greater scale. That expansion matters because it shows the mission is no longer occasional. It is becoming a growing layer of defense built around speed, low cost, and direct pursuit rather than heavy traditional air defense systems. The interaction between the two sides is becoming sharper here. Russia keeps using UAVs to scout, correct, and support the front. Ukraine is answering by striking directly at those airborne tools before they can help shape the ground fight. The result is pressure on every link at once. Vehicles are hit on the move, infantry is hunted after dispersal, and now drones in the sky are also being removed before they can guide the next action. Once one side starts losing not only men and machines below, but also UAVs above, the entire rhythm of coordination begins to strain very quickly. That leaves a larger question hanging over this stage of the war. If cheap FPV interceptors can increasingly remove enemy drones before they complete their mission, then is this the beginning of a new form of low-cost air defense? The final stage of this strike chain unfolds in Vovchansk, where Ukrainian FPV units are no longer focused only on combat vehicles near the line. They are now hitting the rear flow that keeps Russian forces moving forward. First, the approach vehicles are stopped. Then the infantry thrown out of them is chased across open ground. After that, the protected assets behind the push are struck. Once those layers are under pressure, the next targets are the trucks, ammunition loads, and small transport vehicles still trying to keep the assault alive. One of the clearest cases begins with a Russian truck moving along a route that looks less exposed than the main road. It is bringing men or supplies toward the area where the next action is supposed to continue. From the ground, that kind of movement may seem routine. From above, it stands out immediately. The vehicle follows a predictable line, its speed stays steady, and the route offers very few real escape options once an FPV locks onto it. The attack develops fast. The drone closes from behind, corrects its angle, and stays with the truck long enough to remove any doubt about the target. There is no long pause and no sign that the vehicle can shake off the pursuit. The strike lands directly, and the damage is immediate. In a case like this, the loss is not limited to one truck on one road. Whatever that vehicle was carrying now stops moving at the exact moment it was needed further forward. Another scene showed soldiers with quad bikes, a type of vehicle that is becoming used more often recently. Russian forces are using them because they are smaller, faster, and easier to push through damaged ground or narrow side routes. A truck is easier to notice and easier to trap on a fixed path. A quad bike looks more flexible. It can cut across rough terrain, move with less weight, and reach places that larger transport cannot. That is exactly why it appears useful in a drone war. Yet the same footage also shows how little protection it gives once detected. In one strike sequence, a quad bike is moving with the kind of speed meant to reduce exposure. The rider is trying to cross the dangerous stretch quickly and rely on agility rather than protection. The FPV follows the movement, drops lower, and keeps the vehicle centered while it moves across open ground. The chase is short because the quad bike has no armor and almost no ability to survive a direct hit. Once the drone reaches it, the strike ends the run at once. The speed that was meant to keep it alive only carries it deeper into the engagement. This is what makes the Vovchansk pattern so serious. The rear flow is no longer separate from the battle. It is inside the battle. Trucks, supply loads, troop carriers, and quad bikes are all being pulled into the same strike chain. Russian forces are trying to keep the offensive alive with smaller vehicles, alternate routes, and faster movement between points. Ukraine is answering by keeping FPV pressure on those routes until every trip becomes a risk. Once that begins, logistics stops being background activity and turns into a visible, vulnerable part of the fight itself. When that happens, an assault does not collapse in one dramatic moment. It weakens trip by trip, vehicle by vehicle, until the force at the front is no longer receiving what it needs to keep pushing. What makes this story truly unsettling is that the real damage may begin long before the main assault is even visible. Across this entire sequence, Ukraine is not using FPV drones just to create dramatic strike footage. It is using them to break an attack layer by layer. Vehicles are hit on the move. Troop trucks are struck before they can unload safely. Tanks hidden near the line are found and destroyed. The Kasta radar and its support vehicle are taken out in sequence. That is the most serious part of the picture. The danger sits in the fact that every link can now be dragged into one continuous strike chain. Once that happens, the battlefield is no longer decided only by who has more men or more armor. Looking ahead, the next phase may become even more dangerous. FPV pressure could shape ground war more deeply, and the fight over logistics and low-altitude airspace may become even more important than many expected. The open question is whether Russia can adapt fast enough to break this pattern, or whether each new push will keep running into the same trap from above. If this video helped make sense of what is really happening on the battlefield, like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear reporting on modern war, weapons, and the politics behind the fight.